When done right, tactical and strategy RPGs are some of the most addicting and rewarding games out there. They live and die in precision. One mistake can cost you the fight, the mission, or even your favorite character. That's why series like Fire Emblem and Final Fantasy Tactics have become staples for the genres. And it's no surprise that Megami Tensei tried its hand at them too. Devil Survivor 1 and 2 nailed the formula, Persona 5 Tactica brought the style, but then there's the very first attempt in the series, Majin Tensei. And that's a different story. Released in 1994 for the Super Famicom, Majin Tensei came out during Atlus's first true experimental phase, a time when they were still testing what Megami Tensei could be beyond a first-person dungeon crawler. Though tactical RPGs were still a niche genre at the time, they were growing fast. Fire Emblem was already a huge hit in Japan, Ogre Battle was an unexpected commercial success that would lead to Tactics Ogre, and Shining Force was getting North American and PAL releases. So, Atlus decided to take the series' familiar systems and reimagine them in a tactical RPG format inspired by those games, leading to the creation of Majin Tensei. While ambitious, the game just never really stuck though. Unlike other Megaten spin-offs, the first Majin Tensei isn't particularly beloved or often discussed for that matter. It's pretty much only known for its slow, rough, and unforgiving gameplay. Over time, it has gained some interest thanks to YouTubers like Marsh and Carlos MW, but that doesn't automatically make it a good game. And I went in expecting a pretty hollow experience, and in many ways, that's exactly what it is. It's undeniably flawed, a game full of inconveniences and wastes no time throwing you into chaos with a deliberately vague narrative that ends up leaving you with more questions than answers. Yet, while it's easy to point out its many flaws, there are overlooked qualities that make this game doable. No, not like that. If it wasn't obvious by now, Majin Tensei doesn't play like most other Megaten games. It's a pure tactical SRPG, one that's based on you building an army of demons trying to overcome swarms of enemies with permadeath stakes. While it may not be narrative heavy, its gameplay, though dated, is surprisingly clear, featuring many of the staple systems found in Megaten, sometimes in different, even better ways than other games from this era. There's a lot of charm behind the smaller details as well, with amazing demon designs and a great, though limited soundtrack. But again, all of this doesn't mean it's a great game. Breaking things down, there's a constant game of tug-of-war between great concepts and terrible execution, and this is on full display from the very opening moments. The story begins abruptly with almost no setup, and immediately immersing you in a world that's already falling apart. You play as an unnamed hero. Just like the player, the hero is thrown into chaos with almost no warning. Outside of a short explanation when starting the game, there's no context or guidance. You're given a mysterious comp that can summon demons and then thrown into your first battle. The bigger picture is pretty simple, taking place in a world decades after a conflict between two nationalist groups. Now, a portal is opened, allowing demons to enter the world, and you taking on the demons that have invaded the city. Early in your journey, you'll rescue a girl who's suffering from amnesia. Like the protagonist, she can also summon demons. The two of you end up working together, with the heroine essentially acting as a guide, giving more context at certain points. Together, you'll take on demon infestations, rescue civilians, and go through several bosses, while also uncovering fragments of a larger crisis. You'll also cross paths with a few other figures. Etienne, a foreigner who believes the Japanese government isn't taking the invasion seriously, and Minami of the Demon Suppression Squad. Both initially seem like key characters. Etienne reveals the reason behind Tokyo's earthquakes, and Minami's group of soldiers end up being slain by Medusa, hinting at a larger world and story. And eventually, one of them will join your party under their true form. Technically, there is a way to convince both to join your party, but the game's awkward navigation and lack of any hints make it impossible for the player to really know this, highlighting the noticeable issue that once the smaller details come into play, the storytelling becomes obtuse. Instead of expanding on the narrative or developing its characters, the focus leans heavily on atmosphere and gameplay. The dialogue often adds little clarity, mostly leaving you in the dark. I even ended up questioning my own ability to read a couple times because of this. Major plot points like the demon base in Yggdrasil, the Tower of the Crescent Moon, the Expanse, and the final confrontation are rushed or only partially built, leaving the stakes and the scale feeling unfinished. And figuring out how to recruit certain characters or trigger any story events is almost impossible without outside help. The lack of any open overworld also restricts any sense of world building, with all the progression being linear, creating the illusion of movement while leaving details and development behind. Although there are cabins placed on maps during combat to give some details, I find this to be an absurd and clunky method in an attempt to build its world that interferes with the gameplay itself. And these issues make it difficult to add further development for characters like the heroine. Beyond rescuing her and learning she has amnesia, there's almost nothing else added to her for a good part of the story. There's no background, no objective, nothing. What makes things worse is that her backstory is tied to a single ending, which also happens to be the most tedious one to achieve. I get that minimalist storytelling can have its benefits, but in Majin Tensei's case, it undermines the one aspect of the game that stays with you the entire time. Although we do see her role shift from this mysterious partner to a slight voice of reason, if you don't get the good ending, the entire potential of the character is completely wasted. Speaking of endings, there are 3 in total. A good one, an okay one, and a bad one. But I want to focus on the good one for right now. This easily has one of the most ridiculous set of requirements to achieve. Not because of how difficult they are, but because of how vague everything is within the story. In order to unlock this route, you have to replay scenarios 46 through 48 3 separate times, which can take up to around 3 to 6 hours depending on if you're using emulation or not. You'll end up finding Isis sealed in ice and then receiving the Hinogatsuchi from the priest and putting the hero's soul in it. Once you do that, return to Isis and free her. She'll then ask you to spare Astaroth when the time comes. If you do this, you'll get another staff and will have to go all the way back and return it to Isis. Next you'll move on to Scenario 50, which doesn't require anything specific. But Scenario 51, this is where things really start to fall apart. I guess they already have, but it's what frustrated me the most. Here, you can't kill a single demon, but the game doesn't tell you this unless you wander all the way to a cabin tucked away in the top corner of the map. Talking to the person inside is the only time where the game actually hints at what you're supposed to do. I guess the demons only having 1 HP and not being aggressive is supposed to be taken somewhat as a clue, but it's completely backwards from what the entire game has conditioned you to do for the last 40 missions. And instead, you'll have to go through a desert moving 1 tile at a time to a shrine in the center. Following this, you'll need to spare Lucifer when you face him and receive the Moonstaff. Head back to Isis and give her back her staff. And if you manage to do all of that, you'll be locked into the true ending. If you fail any of these requirements, you're pushed either into the okay ending or the bad one. Whether you kill any demons in Scenario 51 will determine which one of these you'll get. I'll be honest with you, I didn't go for the true ending. The story simply doesn't warrant spending hours doing tedious, counterintuitive tasks, especially in gameplay that's extremely slow. Though I do find it to have some genuinely great mechanics, it still isn't worth the trouble. Instead, I just settled for the okay route by avoiding kills and filled in what I missed by checking out guides and other videos afterwards. To those that went through all of this just to get the true ending, I salute you. Ultimately though, by the end, you're just left with a half-formed confrontation with just enough context to understand what you're fighting for, but not enough to truly feel invested. Even if there are multiple endings, the conditions to unlock them, at least the good ones, are cryptic, practically requiring a guide just to see the full narrative. The dialogue is empty, character development is minimal, and even with a guide, many key moments feel unresolved. The story shows broad ambition, especially when exploring themes like morality and heroism, but it's all met with uneven execution, a flaw that mirrors the gameplay itself. For anyone familiar with Fire Emblem, most of the gameplay will be pretty recognizable, just with the Megami Tensei twist. You'll progress across an overworld in a linear fashion, moving from one stage to the next. Each stop drops you in a battle scenario, a shop to buy equipment or demons, or a short scene that advances the story. In total, there are 59 scenarios that you'll need to complete, though a few of them are optional. Each will have a clear objective like defeat all enemies or reach a specific destination, goals that are straightforward but can still surprise you in unexpected ways. The combat is turn-based with both sides taking turns moving their units across grid-based maps. The maps are often large and varied, featuring terrain that affects movement, treasure, and healing portals. When a unit attacks, the camera switches from the overhead map to a close-up of only the party being attacked. To me, this is a bit of a weird presentation style, but one that you'll get used to quickly. You can recruit and summon up to 30 demons, though you're more than likely never going to want to do this given how slow the game can get. Human party members level up normally, gaining experience and distributing stat points each time they level up, while demons rank up similar to early Persona titles, learning new skills as they grow stronger. True to the classic Megaten style, the protagonist is limited to only using physical attacks. The rest of your party handles skills, healing, and ranged abilities in addition to using physical attacks as well. Personally, I've never been a fan of this restriction, but it actually works surprisingly well in this format. Also, being able to summon demons mid-term adds some flexibility, letting you experiment with positioning and strategy. One thing to note is that combat always keeps you busy, though not always in the best ways. Each map does feature a fairly diverse mix of enemy types, and while not all of them hit hard, a few can deal some real damage. There are no buffs or debuffs as well, making it vital to exploit enemy weaknesses whenever you can. Though the game does let you check strengths and weaknesses fairly openly. The AI is also surprisingly smart, often targeting your strongest demons to force you into healing or retreating. Enemies also rank up similar to your demons, making them a bit stronger with an attack or two. Some of the maps will include portals that spawn reinforcements. These can't be destroyed, but standing on a portal will stop new enemies from appearing. Though the idea of spawning enemies is something I find to be a nice touch, it could have used a bit more thought, and ends up forcing you to waste turns and resources just to keep new enemies from spawning, at times leading to an unexpected death or two. These challenges are part of the game's core identity, but they also foreshadow a bigger issue: how maps, pacing, and resource management amplify frustration. Neutral parties wandering around aimlessly and limited inventory space only make these problems more apparent as the game progresses. The maps grow increasingly vast and time-consuming, yet often feel clunky and almost empty despite their size. There's long stretches of where literally nothing happens other than enemies moving around for 5 minutes, dragging down any sense of pacing this game was trying to make. I'm not lying when I say I managed to balance doing house chores while playing this game, while preset party placement kills momentum even further. Your characters often start miles apart from each other or the enemy, forcing you to waste turns just to regroup or reach your target. Even with plenty of high-level demons available to recruit, the difficulty spikes often means your party's underleveled, forcing you to backtrack and grind just to keep up. While these issues can make some stages feel exhausting, Majin Tensei does include a few quality of life features that help soften the blow. You can save mid-battle, and considering that some of the encounters can last over an hour, this is a lifesaver. Though considering emulation, I'm not really sure how meaningful this feature really is today. You can also replay a few stages to grind for experience or recruit a few demons. This at least helps prep for some of the stronger enemies you'll encounter later on. I wouldn't say this fixes the pacing issue, but it does make the grind feel a bit more manageable. But the game's core systems also work together to make up for some of these frustrations as well. And honestly, I think they're some of the most clear and overall enjoyable compared to the older Megaten games. One of the best examples being the Moon Phase. Unlike most Megaten titles, which often leave this system vague, Majin Tensei lays it out for the player pretty clear, showing both recruitment chances and attack strength depending on the current phase. To me, the Moon Phase has always been one of Megaten's most interesting yet poorly presented systems. Even modern titles rarely explain how it actually works. Majin Tensei not only highlights its importance, but also turns what felt like blind luck into something you could plan around. Knowing when enemy attacks will be stronger or weaker adds an additional layer of tactical consideration. They may feel like small details, but they reinforce the idea that combat should be about strategy in this game. And recruiting demons is also made fairly easy thanks to this, all while keeping the same personable and fun dialogue during negotiations. Though the negotiation mechanics are rather simple. More than 90% of the time, demons will just ask for Maka once and then join your party. Occasionally, some may join without even asking for anything or just request a gem, but almost every time saying yes is enough to recruit them. But at the end of it, it feels like the game is encouraging you to experiment and collect more demons than you normally would, especially since your comp allows you to store up to 30 demons, giving you plenty of room to recruit any demon you really want. And with that in mind, Fusion is another standout system showing how the game adapts classic Megaten into this format. Here, Fusion is handled two different ways. The first being the more common method, heading to the Heretics Manor on the overworld and selecting 2 demons to fuse, being pretty in line with the Cathedral of Shadows and mainline SMT. The second and far more interesting method is handled mid-battle by having 2 demons occupy the same tile. I completely missed this detail at the very beginning, and honestly, I imagine this happened to a few others as well. Once you know it's there though, it will end up being your sole fusion mechanic. Plus, it's also a great buffer to fuse weaker demons or ones on the verge of dying during mid-battle. Of course, we can't forget about the art and music, both being near-perfect representations of the mid-90s gritty cyberpunk tone that defined early Megaten. With Majin Tensei, there's a lot more attention to detail though. The demon designs and sprite work can easily be seen as some of the best the series had seen up until this point. And in addition to all of that, the backgrounds that shift depending on your placement during battle are also a nice touch. Really, the only drawbacks are how static the maps and overworld can feel at points. Adding a bit more dimension to the terrains on the maps, or shrinking them by like 50% would have made this game not only stand out more, but actually playable, at least to an enjoyable extent. As for the soundtrack, though it is limited, it perfectly captures what made older Megaten feel so cool, bringing this funky, post-apocalyptic cyberpunk vibe. Personally, I do think it elevates the combat and makes the overworld a lot more fun. My only real complaint here is how each party has its own dedicated battle track, which sometimes cuts short or loops awkwardly depending on how many enemies remain. When it all comes down to it, the gameplay may not feel polished, but there's a lot more there than you're initially led to believe. Just like the story, it suffers from a lack of refinement and direction in development. And given a lack of any tutorial or guides, this really is a sink or swim game. So, where does this leave us? Well, to me, Majin Tensei is the epitome of disappointment. Looking at it now, I think it's fair to say that Majin Tensei had the potential to be a good game. One that could have stood alongside other greats in the genre like Fire Emblem, Tactics Ogre, and even Front Mission. But where those games built depth through pacing and clear design, Majin Tensei buries its own ideas under awkward execution and a clear lack of respect for the player's time. Honestly, the game does have a lot going for it, at least at the time of its release. There's a lot of pieces to both its gameplay and narrative that could be so great, but poor execution strips that away entirely. For those reasons alone, I really can't justify recommending this game to anyone, and it gets a pretty hard pass from me. As for its ranking, I don't think it's E-tier levels of awful. The core concepts show promise, maybe enough to improve in its sequel Majin Tensei 2, but that's a video for another time. For that, Majin Tensei lands in the D tier, bringing some value, but more frustration than anything else. As a whole, Majin Tensei is a game where you can see this interest in version buried underneath, and that's why I believe it's a game that almost worked. It at least works as an introduction to Atlus trying to experiment with something new. And considering all the banger titles Atlus was able to release later down the line, I can overlook Majin Tensei being a pretty poor experience overall. And that pretty much wraps up this review. I want to know, what do you think of Majin Tensei? Drop your thoughts in the comments down below. Got a Megaten game or something else you want me to review next? Share that as well. Don't forget to check out my other videos, and I'll forever be at your service.